Guitars are incredibly popular instruments, but have you ever thought about the labor and skill that goes into making one? Right after this, we're going to talk with Jarrett Schaub, a luthier who makes guitars. Stay tuned.
Hey everyone, really excited that you join us for another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. If this is your first time, please click that subscribe button and that bell. If you've been here multiple times, please make a comment in the comment section or write us a review. We'd be grateful. I want to keep on producing these videos and these podcasts and memes and really moving The Catholic Gentleman into the lives of more and more men. We're only scratching the surface just now, and we need donors to do that. So if you are inspired, we pray that you might jump over to patreon.com/Catholic Gentleman. We've got some fun tiers, $5, $10 a month, anything like that is grateful, hugely helpful for us in our ministry as we evangelize and help to make men holy. So today we are excited to be joined by Jarrett Schaub. He's a devout Catholic. He's also a convert, a husband, father, and third generation luthier. So he's been in the business of making guitars for many, many years. He makes handcrafted custom acoustic guitars there in Colorado, although he was from Texas, which is where I live, and we'll have to figure out why he went away. He also plays the guitar. In addition to that, he used to play in a band that was Jarrett Schaub and the Vagabonds for several years here in Texas. And he stepped away in 2012 to do that, which is all the more rewarding in his vocation, which was growing his family. So he made his first guitar in 2002, and I would say we're about to hear the rest of that history. So Jarrett, how are you doing? Thanks for joining us.
I'm doing great, John, Sam. Thank you guys for having me. Yeah, very excited to be here.
Awesome. And so as Sam and I are both musicians and we do love music, we love the idea of producing music as much as consuming music. I want to hear from you why you got into guitar playing and why you decided that the path that your father or grandfather had set before you is the one that you were going to take. You know, I assume you had other interests in life, and I just love to hear you talk about your beginnings and what brought you in not only to playing guitar, but also to crafting them.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So I grew up in Central Texas. My grandfather was a full-time preacher, Protestant preacher. Wow. And his side gig was building guitars. And so I grew up in a family where you learned to play guitar. If you were one of the men in the family, it's a large family. Yeah. If you were one of the men in the family, you were pretty much expected to learn to play the guitar. And if you were a female in the family, you were a singer. So I grew up just fully encompassed in music. My grandfather had many bands, or was part of many bands growing up through college. My father was also a musician growing up, had many traveling bands through Central Texas. And like I said, we just, the family just was involved in music, and it was all because of my grandfather. And so, you know, growing up, Sundays were spent at church, and then we would come home for luncheons. And then after the luncheons, we would sit around and play guitars. And that's how our Sundays were spent. Yeah, they were amazing.
Sounds amazing.
And so, yeah. And so I guess before that, though, getting into playing guitars, my parents were divorced. And my father's side was the one that was so heavily involved in music, and my mother's side, not so much. But when I was with my father on the weekends, we would practice guitar, and he would show me, you know, hey, practice on this before the next time you come back, and let's see where you're at. And so I'll be honest with you, at first it was the guitar wasn't for me, to be honest with you. I enjoyed singing, but playing guitar wasn't really part of, you know, when somebody's pushing something on you, and it's just, you know, you got to decide you want to do it, right? And it took me until my high school years is when I really got excited about learning to play the guitar. And so that's when I started playing. The building of the guitars came later, right after I got out of high school. My grandfather was building, he'd been building for 40 years or so. He builds acoustic guitars, electric guitars, basses, fiddles, mandolins. Wow. He kind of the whole spectrum. And my father at that time, he wanted to not let that skill, go away with my grandfather as he was getting into his older years. And so he picked up and started building underneath my grandfather. And then a couple years later, I decided I wanted to do the same. And so I asked to be led in the shop, and they let me come in and build my first instrument. So that was around the 2002 timeframe. And I've taken it from there. I had a hiatus of about 10 years. After I moved to Colorado, I just did not have the space, nor did I have the tools. And it took me a while to gain all of that, to gain the space and gain the tools and to pick it up again. But I'm head over heels for it now.
Wow.
Building, yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. One of the things I love about traditions of craft is they so often involve family. And a lot of people have kind of scattered families. They're all over the country, or they're, just not those strong connections that there used to be. And I'm just wondering, what was it like for you just kind of growing up around this rich culture of music and craftsmanship? And how did that kind of influence who you became today?
Oh, goodness. Well, growing up around it, I wouldn't ask for any other way of growing up. It was, like I said, music was everything to this family, and it still is. But I'll go even further back. I guess my grandfather, he wanted a good guitar, but he couldn't afford it. And so he came up with a way to build an instrument on a budget. He started disassembling older pianos at first to afford to find the wood to build these guitars. And it just started from there. But growing up around it, I feel blessed to have been just so heavily involved in music. Everything we did was just involved around music. We had a family band for many years that played locally in the Central Texas area, led by my grandfather. And then, like I said, we just Sundays were full of music and family. I feel blessed to have grown up around the music like I did.
Yeah, I bet it does. It's very idyllic. Just the thought of it. That was not how I grew up, and it just really sounds so contrary to, I would say, American youth, not only today but even in our generation. Where there was far more movies and TV and distractions of that nature than just a good, wholesome, community and love and sharing vocally, together. So I think that's exciting. Well, I want to talk to you about the process. I have no clue, with the process of building a guitar. And so I'd love to hear your creative elements. I assume you're not building the same type of guitar. I don't know if you build classical guitars or, strictly, acoustical guitars. And I'd love for you to dive into what does the process of building a guitar look like? Pretty much assume that 99.9% of all of us are clueless, when it comes to that process. So I'd love to enter into your world of building guitars.
Yeah, sure. I build them fully from scratch. All of the wood that I build from comes from California. I order from a luthier mercantile out of California. And in total process wise, it takes about 100 working hours to build an acoustic guitar. And that's what I focus on, is acoustic guitars. Yeah. I think eventually someday I'll jump off into electrics, but right now my passion is just acoustics. I build your typical dreadnoughts and your OM or orchestra models, the smaller body guitars. That's kind of my focus these days, is dreadnoughts and OM guitars. And so, like I said, everything is from scratch. Everything is hand done. I plane everything down by hand. I use a lot of techniques that have been passed on to me from my grandfather. And then I've also brought in some newer processes that speed the process up, I guess. But yeah, you start with nothing, and what you wind up with is, it's just, there's nothing like it, making something with your hands and saying, hey, I did this. This was something that I made from nothing. Process wise, I don't know how much you want me to get. I mean, there's a lot that goes into it. There really is. You start with the bending of the sides. That's all hand done. And then shaping the braces. The braces, I don't know how familiar you are with the design of an acoustic guitar, but that's what really matters. You can use any different type of wood you'd like to use on the outside, but what really matters is what's on the inside. If that makes sense.
Perfect. Yeah, continue.
Yeah, no, it's just a lot of trial and error, I guess you'd say. Years ago, when I started building, I had my grandfather to lean on, and I had the 40 plus years to lean on and to pick his brain and say, hey, is this right? Is this wrong? Should I do this? Should I not? And now that he's no longer here, it's just right now for me, it's trial and error. I'll try something, and then once the guitar is done, if it's, I'll go back and change that if I need to, and try it a different way. But it's just a really long process for me. It takes about, if I'm just fully at it, I can build one in about 3 weeks. That's from the time I start to the time it's ready to start the finishing process. The finishing process, the lacquers or the French polish, whatever you want to use for the finish, that takes some time. But the actual building of the instrument is about a 3-week process, if I was to put my head down and just work nonstop.
Excellent. You said the most important part of the guitar. Is that also the most difficult part?
It is. Yeah. The piecing it together is all, I'm not going to say it's easy, but there's a lot that goes into it. But yeah, the bracing on the inside is what really matters, and the stuff that you should really pay attention to. That's where the tone of the guitar is, the sound. That's where you're going to get the sound, is from the bracing on the inside. There's a lot. I'm sorry.
You just answered my next question, because I was going to ask, like, what affects the sound of a guitar, and so is it really just that body of it that really changes it?
Yeah, it's the way it's shaped. Okay. I use we've always modeled our guitars. It's the X bracing is what it's called, and we model them similar to the way Martin guitars are braced on the inside. We've taken that and adjusted it a little bit, but it's real similar to the way a Martin guitar is finished out. And it's all in the bracing, to be honest with you. Of course, the thickness of the wood and the types of woods, they have very little to do with it, but it's more the bracing on the inside.
So is that like a really precise, like, mathematical process, or is it really more intuitive, where you just kind of have a feel for what creates a good sound?
Well, like I said earlier, it's all trial and error, right? I have, it's a real mathematical process. There's, I start with, okay, I'm going to map it out to this dimension. And then from there, you just start shaping it. It's, once you close up the guitar, it's not too late to go back and achieve a different sound that you want. It's just working through the sound hole to go in and shape those braces a little different if you don't quite have the sound that you're looking for.
How do you test that?
Well, for me, it's a tap test on the top and the back of the guitar for a certain tone. There's no real process. I think, the big suppliers and the guys that are mass producing these, there's technology out there that will test these guitars, and make sure that they're peaking out where they need to, where they need to be. For me, it's all hand done. I don't have any technology involved in it. It's just tapping on the top and on the back and just achieving a certain tone. And then from there, yeah, like I said,
you must have a really good ear.
What's that?
You must have a really good ear.
Well, like I said, you can always go back and change it if it's not what you want it to be. But yeah, that's how I do it.
I kind of want to, that's an incredible craft process of just starting with some raw wood and shaping it into this playable instrument. And I want to, maybe we can come back to that a little bit later, but I kind of want to rewind a little bit and go back to something that kind of piqued my curiosity, because you came from, it sounds like, this really like tight-knit family revolving around music, but also like Sunday worship and things like that. And definitely like, kind of a Bible preacher kind of atmosphere. And your grandfather was a preacher. How did you end up Catholic?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great question. I grew up. So the one grandfather that was the luthier as well, he was a Baptist preacher for a long time, and then started his own church. I believe it was in the late 80s, early 90s. It was a non-denominational church. And I went to his church growing up. My other grandfather was a preacher as well. He just wasn't a full-time preacher. He was more of a special guest type speaker when he was called upon. But my wife and I moved to Denver, Colorado from Central Texas back in 2012. And I immediately fell in with a church here that my brother and sister-in-law went to. They were actually looking for a bass player to be in the worship group. So I fell into playing at this church, and my wife and I joined this church for a long time until we moved to Evergreen, which is, I don't know if you're familiar with Denver, but just west of Denver, about 20 minutes, is Evergreen. And that's where we wound up, and that's home today. That's where we're still living. But we were still making the trek back and forth to Denver to go to this church. And in late 2017, my wife came to me, and let me rewind a little bit. She was born and raised in the Catholic Church. And she stepped away for quite some time until that late 2017. There was a conversation had between her and I. She came to me one night and said, "Hey, I am being pulled back to the Catholic Church." And while we were still part of this church in Denver, and at the time it was a pretty difficult conversation, to be honest with you, between the two of us. It was a tough moment for us too, because it's not that I had anything against the Catholic Church. I just had never had any involvement within the church. And I wasn't familiar with it. And so she just said, I'm going back to the church. I'm going to go back through RCIA. And that's where we stayed for quite some time. She was going to the Catholic Church, and I was continuing to drive down to Denver and be part of the church that I was part of. And then a few months after that, she came to me and then said, "Look, I want to baptize our girls in the church. We have 3 daughters." Mm-hmm. And she said, I want to baptize our girls Catholic, and I want to bring them into the church. And at that moment, I felt like I wasn't being honest to her, and I wasn't doing her justice by just continuing to go to the church that I was going to. At that moment, I thought, well, I need to at least see what the Catholic Church is all about, right? I didn't have any idea as to what to expect, but I started, I just told her, "Look, I'll go with you and I'll see what this is all about." Because I can't say one way or the other if I agree with the Catholic Church without giving it a try, correct?
Yeah.
I started going to Mass with her, and I don't know if this is too much detail. Do you want me to go?
No, please keep going.
No, please do.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So we, yeah, I went to mass with her a couple of times. And then the third time we went, she had her RCIA class right after mass. And so we were going to go to mass. The girls and I were going to leave. She was going to go to her class, and then we were going to pick her up afterwards. And as we pulled into the church, somebody grabbed my wife and said, "Hey, class is starting." They had moved up the time, and we didn't know it. And so my wife says, "Well, you've got to go into mass by yourself. I'm going to RCIA." And it was a awkward moment for me again, because I didn't know a lot about the Catholic Church. And it's a great story, I feel like. So my girls and I went into mass, and we sat in the back row as far away as we could. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I need to, it takes some nudging. It takes a sign. It takes, I need those obvious, "Hey, this is the direction I need you to go" type of moments. And before mass started, I got down on my knees to say a prayer. And that's what I asked for was, I need something right now, right? I could really use a sign or a nudge. And is this right for me? Is this right for my family? Is this right for my girls? And I said a prayer, and no longer, I opened my eyes after the prayer, and someone grabbed me on the shoulder, and they said, "Would you and your daughters bring up the gifts during this morning's mass?" And I had never done that. I knew from the couple times before that I had seen, okay, I know how to do this. But at that moment, it was like, okay, I was just asking for a sign. That's a pretty good sign, for me.
Wow.
And I shared that with my wife afterwards, because it really moved me during that mass. It's, I asked for something, and it was right there in front of me. And so I knew at that point I needed to pay a little more attention and just dive deeper. And so we started going to mass together. And I'll be honest with you, the signs and the nudges just kept coming. They just didn't stop. I could go on and on about some of the others that I had, but it was just, it was obvious the direction that I needed to go, that I needed to look. And so shortly after that, they allowed me to join the RCIA class with my wife. And so I started sitting in on that, learning more about the church. And we went and met with the preacher a few weeks after that. It was another great story. We went and met with the preacher to talk about the baptism of our daughters. And we left that meeting, and he sent my wife an email and said, "Hey, I feel like Jarrett's ready to enter the church. There's just something in him, and I see something in him. He's ready to enter the church." And honestly, I was feeling the exact same thing. It felt right. That's all I can really say, is just everything just kept pointing me in that direction, and it just felt right. And I knew that that's the direction I needed to go. So we went through RCIA together, my wife and I, and then we all joined the church together in 2018. We were all brought into the church together as a family. Yeah.
Amen. Preach it, brother.
Amen.
That is awesome.
I completely agree. I love you.
Welcome.
What were some of the signs? I liked you said that there were other signs, but for you, what were some of the obstacles of Catholicism other than the unknown? But what were some of those obstacles? We love to hear those things that you were having to overcome, and maybe some signs. I've got a really close friend that for them it was the authority of the church, and that was something that they were really struggling with. And then once that it's truly like once that obstacle fell, they were, praying the rosary and believing in Eucharistic miracles, and it was incredible. So, but I'd love to hear your any opposition, obstacles, or difficulties, or some of these signs that you were mentioning. Let's keep in that direction.
Obstacles, I'll be honest with you, I didn't really have a lot. Like I said, everything that I was learning and everything that I was hearing was just, it just felt right. There really were no obstacles. But I'll be honest with you, it was the rosary. When I was in RCIA, one of the teachers that were part of it, there were 4 of them. He talked heavily on the rosary one day, and I got to where I was praying the rosary every morning. I had a long commute to work, and I mean, I still do it to this day. I pray the rosary almost every morning. Well, on my morning commutes to work, and I'll be honest, that played a huge part in my conversion, was praying the rosary. Obstacle wise, there really wasn't a whole lot of obstacles on my end. Once I opened up and just decided to absorb it all, it just came. It was just right. It just felt right. Yeah. Sign wise, gosh, there were a lot. One of the big ones when it came time to entering the church, that's when I found out, you need a sponsor, right? And you have to have your saint, your confirmation saint. And I did struggle with that one for quite some time, because I knew it was a huge decision, and I didn't know a lot of Catholics besides my wife's aunt and uncle. Those were I had some friends back in Texas, but that was too far to lean on as a sponsor. And so I really struggled with that portion of it. But it sounds strange, but one night I had this dream, and it was around the time that I needed to choose my sponsor, and I needed a sponsor. I knew that, but I also needed a confirmation saint, or a patron saint. And I had this dream, and I came across this name of, I was walking with my wife's uncle. We'll go down this route. I was walking with my wife's uncle in the dream, and he was the Catholic that I knew, right? And we were talking, and he said, you have to have a sponsor. And I said, well, yeah, that's you, with we're asking him. I just said, yeah, it's you, and he chuckled about it, and he was like, well, you have to have a saint as well too. And I said, well, I do. It's Ignatius. And that was, I just spouted out the name. And I'll be honest with you, I had never heard that name prior to that moment. I mean, it came to me in like this dream. I know it sounds strange, but that's
doesn't sound strange at all. This is how things work.
You're in good company. Yeah.
There's the funny story behind that. The next morning I woke up, and this was on my morning commute. I was driving to work, and I was praying the rosary. And that's when I remembered, oh yeah, you had this dream. Right. And, the Ignatius, I couldn't get that out of my head. So I pulled off the road, and I started to look up Saint Ignatius. I thought, no way is there a Saint Ignatius, and because I'm not kidding. Wow. That was the first time I had heard that name. And I pulled up Saint Ignatius, and I found Saint Ignatius of Loyola. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. He's there. This is the real deal. This is one of those signs that I really need to pay attention to. And nothing against Ignatius of Loyola, but I got to looking into him, and it just did not, to me, it just didn't click. It wasn't what I thought it would be after having this, this dream the night before. And I called my wife shortly after, and I was telling her about this, and I was a little bit frustrated, to be honest with you, because I didn't feel like I connected with the saint like I was supposed to. And she said, well, which Saint Ignatius are you talking about? Because there's another one. And I'm like, oh, there it is right there. Now, so I went to Ignatius of Antioch, and I just fell right in line with him. Once I got to, reading about him, and right then I knew that he was my patron saint. So that was another one of those moments. I don't even know how to explain it, to be honest with you. I hope I did it justice there, but
yeah, you sure did.
What drew you to Ignatius of Antioch?
Yeah.
I'm sorry?
What drew you to Ignatius of Antioch?
Well, it's another one of those things. I guess there's not just one. Oh goodness, you're going to ask me that question. I knew that. Yeah. It's not just one thing. I don't guess. Just his entire story is just it just consumed me. I really can't go into too much detail on that, but it I just knew that was the right guy for me.
He chose you.
Chose me. Yeah,
absolutely. No, I love Saint Ignatius of Antioch. So yeah, he's an amazing saint. Well, shifting back a little bit to guitar, and to your life as a luthier, we're talking about your faith and everything like that, and I'd love to hear what are some of the struggles of building a guitar, and how does your faith life, kind of help you? I imagine, and I'm just going to jump in here, and never having built a guitar, I imagine that you need a lot of patience, and that there is, I mean, because I know the cost of wood. I like to do, woodworking myself, and I know the feeling of cutting something just off, and instead of the opportunity to create something new, it's more of the, throw the $100 piece of wood against the wall. So I'd love to hear from you what your experience and your how your faith guides you within your creation there.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you have to be really good at hiding your mistakes. First off, I mean, there's mistakes in these guitars. It's just how well you can hide those when you're finished. But yeah, patience is key. It's all about patience. And just the intricacy. There's just so much detail work when it comes to a guitar. So many things that could go wrong. And they do. I mean, it doesn't always go perfect. I'll say that. Like I said, it was 10 years that I went without building a guitar. And then when I started back up, I didn't have that person to lean on anymore. So yeah, that's an expensive investment to buy this amount of wood and then just go right into it head first without having that guidance there. So yeah, it sometimes goes the way you want it to, and it sometimes doesn't. But patience is key when it comes to that. But I'm constantly working on my patience. And just to be clear with you guys, guitar building for me is something that I want to do full time. Right now, it's actually more of it's a side job for me. I have a job that I do the rest of the week. This is more just my hobby at the moment that I hope to take further than that someday. But I'm itching to get in the shop all the time. That's where I want to be, and that's where I'm at peace, is when I'm working on an instrument like this. But patience, yeah, patience is key for sure.
Well, I pulled up your website, and these are incredibly beautiful instruments. Not just, obviously the sound is probably fantastic, but also just the finishing details, like that little like mother of pearl S you have there, and the different color woods contrasting, and the just all the details is just really incredible. How do you go about that? Because that probably takes a lot of work in itself.
It does. Yeah. I'm really trying to step out of my comfort zone. My grandfather, he took it to a certain level, the guitar building, and I'm trying to take it further is what I'm doing. There, some of that detail work you see there is stuff that we haven't done before in his shop. But the detail work is what I love. I love the small detail work. It's what makes a guitar, visually, it's what sets it apart from others. In the end, it's all about how it sounds, right? You want a guitar to sound good, but you also want it to look nice too. But the detail work, yeah, I love working with the mother of pearl. Some of the stuff I've done recently is new to me as a luthier. With every guitar I build, I'm trying to push myself just further and further and further, to just step it up a notch each time I do it, sound wise, and, just the visual, what you get out of it, the way it looks. But
I can say you're doing a great job, and very impressive.
Well, thank you so much.
What's your favorite part of the process? Like, what, you start from scratch. I'm curious to also hear what type of woods that you prefer to use, but also what's your favorite part? Like, what's that moment you're itching? And I bet you all of it's a joy, but, is it that fine detailed work that you were bringing up, or, is it the final product? What resonates with you?
I love all of it, to be honest with you. There's not a part of it that I don't enjoy. The detail work, yes, I absolutely love doing that, and I love focusing on that. But the best part about it is, the moment you put strings on it, that each one has a different voice, and that's what's great about custom guitars is, you're not producing the same instrument every single time. Something's different about it from the last guitar you build. So it's always exciting to get to that moment to string it up and hear the voice for the first time. Without using the technology that's out there and available. This is all just done by ear, and that's my favorite part is stringing it up and getting to hear what it sounds like. Yeah,
I bet.
Do you play your own guitars?
I do. Yeah, I do. I'm not much of a player, I'll be honest with you. I'm a good rhythm player, and that's about all I can do. I play and I sing, but my passion is building them.
Wow. What type of music do you prefer to play, or do you have in mind when you're building these?
Well, I grew up around country music, of course. Good old country music. Yeah, and I grew up. My father, when he was traveling and playing full time, he was a top 40s cover band is what he did. The top 40s in the 90s. He was that guy. He was out playing country music. So I grew up around country music. I still play a lot of country music. And, I fall more myself in the Americana type sound. I guess is where I'd put myself, is more Americana. But the country is there for sure. That's what I was born and raised on, was country music.
Yeah, cool.
What's the demand like for these? Is it picking up, or is your name getting out there?
So it's picking up. I do have quite a few people interested in purchasing a guitar right now. Like I said, I've only been doing it, since I first picked it back up it was late 2019 is when I started building again, early 2020. So it's hard to get your name out there when you're only building so many. I've built 4 out of the new shop, and I've got many people that are interested in. Right now, the shop, I don't know if you've seen on the site, it's on hiatus. My wife and I are in the middle of a move right now, and the shop is it'll be up and going in 2 months. So right now I'm not building anything. So I've kind of put everything on hold for the time being, but I'll have everything back up and going in a couple of months. And I've got a few people that are waiting for me to build them one. It's just hard to get it out there,
Yeah.
It's going to take some time. That's all. It's patience again.
Yeah, exactly. And like you're saying, when it's 3 weeks.
Well, I encourage everyone who's listening to check out Schaub House. How do you pronounce that? Schaubhaus.com. We'll put it in the show notes. These are incredibly beautiful instruments, and I actually haven't heard them play, but I'm sure they sound fantastic too. So.
There's some music out there, and there's some there's music attached to that site where you can go and hear some of those guitars. Like cool. I said, each one has its own tone, its own voice.
That's awesome. So do your Sundays kind of revolve around going to mass and then sitting with your daughters and playing the guitar?
Yeah, they do. I actually cantor now at church.
Okay.
So much as I can. I'm cantering at church. So I play Sunday mornings quite a bit, or Sunday evenings, depending on what mass we attend. But yeah, I'm not trying to force music onto them, but they definitely have the desire to learn, and they're starting to pick up the instruments, and they're starting to get interested. So it's a beautiful thing to watch them. There's something in the blood, that's for sure there.
Isn't it? Yeah. It's the same thing with me and my children as well. Like, I don't want to force it on them. I came from playing music 9 hours a day for, a dozen years. And, but I want it to be something that's natural, something that is from the heart and not kind of forced upon them, right? Because if it is, and I knew a lot of individuals in my career that it was forced upon them by their parents, and they're incredible musicians, got into Juilliard, Eastman, Yale, any of these different things, and they just didn't really find joy in what they were doing. And it's kind of like, well, that's a 9-to-5 job. That's not, it's not a passion. So.
Yeah, and I want them to be ready to want to play, and they will, and they already sing. They're all singers. They all have a beautiful voice. But yeah, they're getting there. I'm just not going to force it upon them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I didn't hear what type of woods you prefer to use, because I actually didn't know that the wood has very little effect on the sound. You mentioned that, and so. Then is it really in the eye of the beholder, right? The individual who's creating it. You like to use, East Hunter and rosewood that's going to cost you a ton of money, or you like to use something else. What type of wood, do you fancy?
Sure. Yeah. I like the sound, the warmth of a mahogany guitar. That's the one that I play, that I've built, as a mahogany. It's mahogany, Honduras mahogany, back and sides, and the top is a spruce. It's not your typical build, but it's just what I prefer. East Indian rosewood is another real common. It's just a tried and true. You're going to get a good sound from this type of wood. It's pretty common in guitars, to be honest with you. And if I was to say one or the other, I build more with East Indian rosewood. For the back and the sides, and the top is always a spruce top, and I use a mahogany neck. You just get a nice warm tone from all of those different types of woods. You can move to your harder woods like a maple, and you get a more brighter, more a tinny type sound out of a maple guitar. But yeah, East Indian rosewood is my go-to. Yeah,
very cool.
And then the bracing on the inside is always done from a spruce, always.
And is that standard across the board among luthiers, or is that something unique to the guitars you make?
No, spruce is a common bracing. It's pretty much all you'll see for bracing on the inside.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's light, it's sturdy, it's got good vibration. It's just made for bracing a guitar. Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I love it.
What would you say to aspiring craftsmen, someone who's listening to this, and maybe they are kind of like you, they've got the 9-to-5 job, but they've always wondered about what would be fun to like make some pottery, or carve something, or make an instrument. What would you say to people like that who are just kind of on the fence, or just kind of, they don't know if it's worth the effort? And what tips would you give them in that process?
Well, just not to give up, and just persistence. If you're interested in doing something, just jump right in and do it. Of course, I would do some research. If you're gonna, spend the kind of money you have to do for a guitar, I would do some research on it before you just jump right in it. But we go back to patience. I guess patience is a huge thing when it comes to doing this type of work or working with your hands. Just jump right in. Sorry, I keep looking over a guitar I'm making. I don't mean to not make eye contact, but
no, it shows the guitar you're making.
So this one here is actually in progress. I don't know how well you can see from here, but this is an OM, an orchestra model. It's a smaller body with the cutaway. This is just the rough out. I'm ready now to start fitting the neck onto this guitar. Everything else is done. Binding is done. Bracing is done. Everything is finished on it. We're just ready to put the neck on it and then move from there. That's when you really start. You can get to this point pretty quick. This all goes pretty fast. When you start fitting the neck and doing the fine tuning, that's what slows you down a little bit. But yeah, wow. that one's coming along. That's the East Indian rosewood that you see there. That's a real common wood used on guitars. And then this one here is the one that I play. This is that mahogany about. I don't know how well you can see it there.
It looks good. Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, that's the mahogany. That one's on the site too, if that's what you're looking at, Sam. This one's on the site here, but
yes, yeah,
I play pretty often. That kind of stays with me wherever I go. Yeah. So
it must be a special feeling playing something that you made yourself.
there's nothing like it. Yeah, there's really nothing like it. I get questioned all the time. Where did you find that guitar? Or it's not necessarily because of the sound, it's just the look, and they don't recognize, the logo on the top. And people that play guitar, that's what they look for. What kind of guitar is that? Well, I made it. No, you didn't. Yeah, I did. They don't always believe you.
It's the ultimate business card there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I've always played a custom guitar. I've never had, I have a few store-bought guitars, off the shelf, but, that was one of the things my grandfather did is as you were growing up, he built you a guitar. Whether you wanted it or not, you got a guitar if you were in the family. And like I said, we had a large family, but everyone in the family has a guitar made from him, especially for you.
Wow.
So whether you played it or not,
what a great thing to pass on. Wow, that's incredible. That's awesome. So you said that you make them from scratch. Do you use electric planers or anything like that, or do you do hand planers? What works for you? I know that you mentioned that there's some things that you can do to speed up the process without hopefully losing the quality. Tell us a little bit about some of those things.
Sure. Yeah. No, a lot of it is hand done. Still, I hand plane a lot of the wood. I do use electric planers and sanders. It's just all done by hand, I guess. It's all, you can buy kits online if you'd like to. Certain luthier to sell kits that come to you with the sides bent and the backs are glued together. The bracing is shaped. You just have to piece it together. You can do that, but everything I order is rough planed. It's not the thickness. You have to get that all to exactly what you're looking for. So, I do use electric tools, of course. It would slow process if you weren't doing that. But, some of the things that my grandfather used to do compared to the way I do them now, it's just, for instance, when it comes to bending the sides, he used to bend those on an iron, it had a torch running through it, and you just bent them on an iron and kept fitting it into the mold and then bringing it over and continue to do it until you get it perfect. And it was that way has been done for so long, but there's ways to speed that up. There's jigs that you can make and they can bring them into that shape for you without having to do so much of the handwork there. So I can do it both ways. If he saw the way I was doing it these days, he might yell at back to the way I showed you. But I look for ways to speed up the process, but to still keep it, hand done, handmade, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. It makes a lot of sense.
And 3 weeks is still a long time by modern standards, where everything is instantaneous to craft that body, and that's not even the finished work. So how long does it take with the finished work too?
Altogether, it's about a 2 week long process. If you're gonna do your typical lacquer finish, that's the go-to finish is a lacquer. It allows the wood to vibrate still, but it's also a super durable finish. It doesn't get beat up, it doesn't flake, it doesn't break as easy as some others. But the lacquer process, you spray it and then you let it dry, and then you spray it and you let it dry, and then you let it cure for 3 or 4 days, and then you sand that down, and then you spray again. And it's just, you go kind of back and forth through that process. You have to allow the time for it to cure. You can't go too fast when it comes to the finishing process, where you just wind up with the weak finish. So it's about a 2 week long.
Yeah. Tell us about the frets. Yeah, patience there. Tell us about the frets and the how does that happen? How do you create those? How do you inlay those? My curiosity has been piqued in the creation of guitar.
Well, the fretboard itself, you can buy them pre-slotted, or you can slot them yourselves. For the fret wire itself. I've done both. It sure is easy to buy one that's already pre-done for you and machined perfectly, but you lose that homemade touch without fretting them yourself. But the inlay work is done. Oh my gosh. It's done with a mini router is what it's done with. It depends on what kind of inlay you're going to put in. But if you're just putting in the round fret markers, the dots, you can drill and then glue those in place. But if you're going to do some type of intricate inlay, it's done with like a hand router, a small hand router, and then micro knives, like a scalpel type knife, to do the fine work. Yeah.
There has to be some math in that to make sure that you don't screw things up while you're going through that.
That's intricate work, and that's one of those places where you need to be really good at hiding your the mistakes that you make.
The mistakes aren't always they're a feature, not a flaw, in the sense that they show this was made by a human being. And the Japanese have this word, like I can't remember the exact word. I think it's wabi sabi or something like that, but it's like perfectly imperfect, and I like that because it kind of captures that human touch that machine may get it perfect, but it was made by a machine. So it's kind of like a little bit of yourself in there. So
yeah, no, I like that for sure. Yeah, it's definitely that. Yeah. When I was working for my grandfather, he was standing there with all that knowledge and all that years of experience. He'd stop you before you made a big mistake. But, if there was a small one where a lesson could be learned, he would let you make it and then say, hey, no, here's the way you do it next time. If it was a big mistake that was going to cost you the instrument, of course, he would stop you. It's something I'm missing now.
Yeah, right. So
ahead of yourself. Always be thinking ahead.
Awesome. So that's a good life lesson right there. So great. Well, so where can people find you? What can we put in the show notes and to make sure that people who are interested can stay engaged with you and what you're doing? And I guarantee you we will have a lot of men interested in checking out your guitars. So why don't you speak to that for a little bit?
Well, sure. Thank you. Yeah, it's Schaub House Guitars. And so it's SCHAUB HAUS guitars. That's where you'll find where you can go and look at the guitars and get a sound for them. They can also follow me on Schaub House on Instagram, the same handle for Instagram. I put a lot of the work on Instagram, and then I also play some of the music on Instagram as well too. And then there's some music, if anybody's interested in music, on SoundCloud. Got a little bit of music out there that you can listen to as well too. And it's all done made. Yeah.
Very cool. And you said your website is in hiatus. Is there a place for them to contact you in the meantime, over these 2 months until, that gets up and running? Is there like a little wait list area, or how could they?
The actual website is still up and running. Yeah, it's still going. It's the
It's the shop. Got it. Okay, good. So head over to that website and check it out. And, if you're in need of a guitar, we found your luthier. So.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for being with us, Jared. This has been a wonderful conversation, and love hearing about your craft and your journey of faith. Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. It's been a blessing. And I want to thank you. And I like to just point out, right, a Catholic gentleman in the world, right, making guitars, doing something with his craft. It's a passion of his and something that you're able to work on. And, we're all out there. And so you're in our prayers. Please keep us in your prayers. And as we end every episode, Sam,
be a man, be a saint.
Bye.